run that numbers game down at the fucking CYO.
I got fucking suspended. I can't get in fucking trouble again.
Nah, fucking school never know.
I want to make it to the NFL someday. For that, I gotta go to college. So I gotta watch my fucking ass.
My man told me I gotta run his fucking restaurant when I grow up. What does your old man say?
He says they're gonna fucking rob your restaurant.
You know who I'd want to be? Your Uncle Dickie. How he fucking dresses?
He said he'd give me $500 if I graduate from fucking high school.
Destroying your notion of circular time. It's just that.
Welcome to Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit-down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I just watched The Many Saints of Newark last night.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and I watched The Many Saints of Newark a week ago because I'm Euro trash over here. We get it early. Ha, ha, ha. And I saw it in the cinema. You streamed it, right?
I watched it. I technically watched it at midnight Thursday, so Friday morning, technically. I would have watched it in the cinema if they did Thursday screenings. I could not wait. I did take work off on Friday, so I could stay up and watch. I was very excited. But that means there are many feelings and much baggage and expectations that come into viewing a film like this. We're going to get into all of that. I do want to call out that opening scene with young Tony and young Artie saying fucking over and over again. Favorite scene in the whole movie. That's why I had to pick it. I mean, I could have chosen it's the wanting that makes you... what did the Buddhist monks say? Whatever. It's the scene like right before that, and I was almost going to use it, but I was like, nope. I want little Tony and little Artie saying the F word a bunch of times because their parents do that, and they're trying to be like the adults, and they're smoking cigarettes. Ooh, and they're hanging outside of Holston's. That could be a thing. Who knows? Either way, favorite scene in the whole movie right now on my initial viewing.
I think you're right about the many feelings of Newark that we're probably going to have to... Like, we haven't really thought about it. This is our main episode, or I don't even know if we should call it, like, this is our first reaction, but, like, there hasn't been new Sopranos content in a long time. There probably won't be in a long time, so we may revisit this. We've both only seen it once, and there's obviously, like, a depth of content to plunge into and to discuss and dissect if we so choose. But first of all, on this episode, we're going to start spoiler-free. If you haven't seen it yet, we will discuss things like the characters, the filmmakings, and our opinions. And honestly, if you're a diehard fan, you might not even want to hear that. If you're just like checking in to find out if it's worth your time, it is. If you're listening to us, you should watch it, obviously. It only makes sense. But like, Jim, you told me to text you as soon as I'd seen it, but you told me strictly to give absolutely no indication of if I liked it or not. And if you want to go in as blind as Jim, just pause this, watch it, and come back. But we will give a spoiler warning before we get into like major plot points later in the episode.
That is correct. Yes. Initially here, we'll talk about some broad strokes, but yeah, I know there's some people where they don't even want to hear, like you said, don't even want to hear if you liked it or not. They want to go in blind because it has just come out. It's an exciting time to be a Sopranos fan. I mean, even outside of that, like we started our podcast in like early 2018, I think it was, right? It was like, around January-ish, 2018.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, The Sopranos never really went away, but it has received more resurgence in the past few years. I mean, especially like once the pandemic and the quarantine happened, everyone's locked up in their homes looking for things to watch. Oh, maybe I'll just watch the greatest show ever made. Might as well. Been putting that off for a while. So there's all these think pieces. There's all these, like on social media, it's constant, like, why are young people watching The Sopranos? And there was this article that went out this past week. I think it was New York Times or LA Times, maybe. But it's just kind of nonsense. I mean, I'm not trying to give too much time to this, but it's just kind of breaking down like, well, millennials can relate to how, they look at it differently because they see that The Sopranos is about things ending. And it's like, yeah, you know who else knows that? Anyone that watched the first episode of The Sopranos, because they literally say it right at the start. But I mean, I guess I get kind of the point they're getting at is that, we all like to feel that we're here for the apocalypse. You know what I mean? I think that's like a quote in Fight Club as well. We all like to feel like we're the last generation. And obviously, wherever you're on the spectrum politically, whatever, things could be the worst they've ever been, the most divided they've ever been. And Sopranos is about the decline and the end of things. So everyone can relate to it to a certain extent. But I think we just need to realize it's just an amazing show. And it works on so many levels. Like we've talked about it a lot that, obviously we've dabbled in both sides where you can watch The Sopranos and just enjoy it as like mafia dudes do crazy stuff and they kick ass and whatever. Or you could sit and like pick out the screenshots from the dream sequences and get into the deeper meanings. Or you could just enjoy it as a comedy. There's so many levels and layers. That's why it's an amazing show.
Honestly, I think you're right in that this has obviously been like with the lockdowns all over the world, there's been a bit of a resurgence, renewed interest. And that's really great timing for this film because there's probably potentially going to be another wave of that for people who have watched this film now and will go on and watch the show. I honestly didn't know or realize, I guess, because the movie industry has been so confusing over the past few years. I didn't know if it was going to get like a broad release. I was like, are they going to show it in the normal cinemas here? Like, is it going to be everywhere? Like, or is it just going to be like it's an adaptation of a TV show? It's got a really broad release, obviously. I now know, and like even back home in Sweden, my mother's sending me photos of big articles about The Sopranos, kind of like what you're talking about, and I haven't read them yet. I don't know if they're like nonsense, like ending of The Sopranos explained, those sorts of things, or if they're actually insightful. But yeah, it's a very good show that everyone should get into. But for me, this was also like the first cinema experience in a long time. I was quite overwhelmed just by that aspect. I think my girlfriend has a picture of me like, just clutching my face, overwhelmed, not knowing what to say at the end of it. And I guess, that's the qualifying statement of the podcast. We might revisit it once we've digested a bit. But if we can move to our summaried opinions at this stage in the game, my opinion is that it's good but not amazing. I think this film goes a long way towards working on its own as a film, and it avoids a lot of the prequel pitfalls. It actually like smashes a lot of those things, doesn't do it too bad, but it doesn't fully work without leaning up against The Sopranos, and that's kind of the short version of my review.
No, I absolutely agree. But then again, I guess it's like I say that as a criticism, but also it should be that, I suppose, because otherwise it would just be, another mob movie, which is fine. I'm fine with another mob movie as well. But I can't imagine this works that well if you're not familiar with The Sopranos or have watched at least, a couple seasons of The Sopranos. It doesn't. I really don't think it stands alone. But then again, like I'm saying, I don't think it should. So it's really hard to gauge. And like I said, you come into this with so much baggage because you're coming off of like an amazing show, and you want it to in 2 hours kind of give you that same, like just deliver the same package, I guess. And it's something different, but still, calling on these references and building off of your existing knowledge of these characters, which sometimes can be a detriment. Honestly, I mean, I don't know how specific we're getting here, but I'm just going to say, like, I like the actor that plays Silvio.
Oh my god,
I
I have a note. I went through all the characters. My note on Silvio is worst part of the movie.
Yeah, I don't like Silvio in this. It's so because, and I think my brother even mentioned this, like, because Silvio in the show almost shouldn't work to an extent, because I mean, he's from Bruce Springsteen's band. He looks kind of silly as is, but it does work, but it shouldn't. So it's hard to then have another actor do like an impression of that. And that was the character that felt the most like we had talked about our fears of like an SNL impression. And I'm not saying the actor did a bad job. He just had he didn't really he had an uphill battle no matter what. He did great with what he could. But it's so tough to try to capture that lightning in a bottle again.
Absolutely, like that's exactly what you said. That it felt kind of like an impression, and how could it not feel like an impression? But it kind of took you out of the movie a little bit, for me as well. And yeah, as I noted, worst part of the movie, but not necessarily his fault. I was just honestly relieved that I didn't get that feeling more often with everything, where people were like, "Oh, gabagool,"
Yeah.
minestrone, the Sopranos, and you're like, "What?" There wasn't too much of it.
There was a moment. He doesn't have the makings of a varsity athlete, and I know that has to be there, but that was the closest I came to like, all right, like it's like I can't criticize it because again, it's such a big part of the show, so we know that moment happened. But then when it does happen, I'm still kind of like, all right, I didn't need to see it.
I felt that way about Holston's its appearance. I feel kind of differently looking back on it now. I don't feel as negative on it, but like when it was there, I was just like, yeah. Of course it's there. It's got to be there. And there's a few things like that where they, you should feel that way, but you don't. At least for me. So I was just happy because every prequel is just peppered with these. But honestly, if I can clarify what I was trying to say, it's not necessarily that it leans on The Sopranos and that's a bad thing, but it's also that it kind of tries to have its cake and eat it too, in that it's Dickie's story, but there's so much of Tony in there, and it all works, but it doesn't quite come together as much as one would hope. And I think also I went with my girlfriend, and she has given me a perspective on like what's it like if you haven't seen The Sopranos, and which was overall positive, but just that things didn't quite come together. Where honestly, if they'd just gone one or two steps further in one or two of the storylines, it would have worked a lot better as an independent product potentially. And I'm being vague, but we'll get into specifics later.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Shit, I lost my thought. But yeah, I mean, and even like Dickie to an extent, yeah, I guess it makes sense that he, since Tony is supposed to have like kind of taken up a lot from him, that Dickie is almost a version of Tony that we're seeing. Like there are elements of Tony that we're seeing in Dickie, and that's how it's playing out through the movie. But yeah, I don't know. It's just tough with some of the references. We'll go real quick on Silvio. Like, no, I'll save it because I don't want to. Like, I guess it's technically a spoiler. It's not a spoiler, but so I'll save it. Forget it.
Okay. Okay. Well, if we like, it can definitely, before like a last of overall thoughts, I think it can be rightfully compared to El Camino, the Breaking Bad film, and like the space that it fills in the mythology of the show. And I think Many Saints comes out ahead in many respects, even though El Camino is a sequel and this is a prequel. I'm still like, I like that one as well. You can hear our discussion on El Camino at showswhichyouknow.com. But I do feel like it did, like, yeah, we were saying beforehand, like, it really, like, our expectations were just unbelievably high. I feel like I'm going to like it. I actually liked it a lot. I don't know if I'm going to like it more or less after rewatching it, and that's kind of why we have to get back to it in the future, I guess. But if we can talk about the film itself and how it's put together, like, the look and feel of it, like from the start, I just love the look and feel of the film. It's what the kids would call a vibe. It's got kind of pastel-ish colors, long lines of houses. It establishes you really well in this universe in the 60s with the costuming, the visual style. It's all on point. There's like this shot of Dickie shaking ash off his cloth after the fires and the riots. And I was looking at that shot like, this is just gorgeous. Like, I could just sit here and watch this visually for a long time. And again, cinema experience after not having been for a while. So maybe I was overwhelmed. But all of this kind of made me inclined to hang out in the world, which I feel like is necessary for the type of pace that the film sets, because like we're in 1967. It's got a very sort of Godfather vibe to the start of it, and we are,
Yeah.
as you said a second ago, it's not the start, but it's like the glory days of the thing that's ending in The Sopranos, and that's a big part of like wanting to sit in that and enjoy the depiction of it, even though obviously despicable characters running around, but colorful despicable characters.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, this is somewhat on topic with the filmmaking, but I do think it's interesting because kind of the stuff we're talking about, obviously coming into a project like this, because we have this like extra baggage or expectations, you definitely give it more of a shot than if it was just some other movie, some random, gangster flick, mob flick that
Yeah.
came out. Because I mean, I'm sure if I just saw this, if this was just some mob flick that came out, I wouldn't be like, oh, that was terrible. But I also wouldn't be like, that's amazing. I'd be like, it's
Yeah.
pretty good, and I would never think about it or watch it again.
Yeah.
But since we do have the Sopranos connection, I am gonna be like, I gotta watch it again. I gotta
Yeah.
look for some deeper references, or what kind of themes are they hitting at again that's similar to the Sopranos. So, but it's like, is that fair? I don't know. I guess with having a show like The Sopranos, I guess they've earned it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and honestly, we should probably do that with more of the media that we consume, because in comparison with a lot of people, I find that like even the shows we really like, we get really gritty into talking about not necessarily how could it have been better, but we talk about every aspect of it. And I sometimes I watch or like if I'm watching something with other people or I watch a film or whatever, and after the fact they're like, "Oh yeah, it was great. I liked it." And I was like, "That should be that sounds nice. That sounds enjoyable." And then they'll watch it again and talk more about it, but like hone in more on the positives, just consuming things not necessarily uncritically, but like with more of a hey excitement, and like going into it of like, let's figure out what they're trying to say here. This is really fun. And I think honestly we're oversaturated with that, because like every review thing online is really hyped up about shit these days, it feels like, or really critical of shit, and there's no in between, and we're kind of in that in between space. But yeah, no, you're I would say it's not necessarily fair, but I think it's a good approach to take nonetheless, that we're sort of giving it more of a chance from where we're coming from. And I hope it doesn't sound like we're sort of talking in circles around like, oh, this film is bad, but we've decided it's good because it's The Sopranos. And I don't think that's quite it. I think you said it just right in that we probably wouldn't have given it as much of a, like, it wouldn't have stuck as much necessarily, but I think there is space in there to dig deeper. Also, I have some scathing criticisms coming up as well, so I think we're on both sides.
We will have some criticisms for sure. And I mean, going back kind of to the filmmaking, I mean, David Chase is always pretty unparalleled with his music choices. I don't know if I'd go out and say like the songs are obscure. I mean, they're obscure to me, but like, he's picking kick-ass Rolling Stones songs, of course. He's 60s and 70s is like his jam. There's always great music on The Sopranos, and I feel like that continues here. And a lot of the stuff, especially when it's playing off of like the unrest and like the riots and stuff, like it's on, like it's almost on the nose with what's going on, but not in a bad way as far as the use of the music. So I mean, it was kind of to be expected, but yeah, of course he nails it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you have any other filmmaking thoughts? I thought we could maybe run through some of the characters and the acting besides Silvio. Like we've made our opinion known, but like Dickie is obviously the main character, Christopher's father, and I felt like he was an excellent main character. As you said, he's very similar to Tony. Like his emotional turmoils, the sheer chaotic nature of what he's doing. And what that is kind of standard to the genre in a way, but it's still like a joy to watch, and I think he does it well. And yeah, similar to Tony in many ways.
Yes, no, he's great. And I mean, it is like, it's kind of a shame because it is like you'd want to see more of him as this character almost.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's not a spoiler for the movie. It's from The Sopranos that things don't quite work out for Dickie Moltisanti. I've seen a lot of criticism of Ray Liotta online, and initially I agreed with it, But then something happens, and then I kind of went back on it, and I thought he actually did very well.
Yeah,
It'd be a spoiler to get into it. We'll get into it shortly, but I've noticed that a lot of people are really picking on Ray Liotta, and I feel like they're missing something on why it is the way it is. But we'll get into it.
That's interesting because I jotted it down as his performance being great, and partly because of the reason you mentioned, which we'll get into. But I just enjoyed everything he did in this film, so we can chat more about that in a sec. Leslie Odom Jr., our friend Aaron Burr as Harold McBrayer. This is a character you wouldn't know much about because I don't think it's he's referenced in The Sopranos or anything. But we spent a fair amount of time with this character, and I don't feel like he has that much going on. And I might be missing stuff there, but there's like this bit with slam poetry, and then he's ready to take over on the world. And this is not a critique of the acting, but it's kind of like he has some lines about how he wanted to be in the army to get a medal, make folks proud. But, he's basically been told by society that all he can do is stack paper. And he decides to do so ruthlessly and becomes an antagonist in this film. That's all fine. There's just not so much three-dimensionality that we're exploring there. And I wonder how much of that is on maybe the cutting room floor, because I read about sort of the editing, and a lot of things were sort of cut out or adapted, which I imagine wasn't the case in The Sopranos, where they had, a runtime pretty tight to hit, and you write it and then it's done. It sounded like from the editing that they, as with any film, had to sort of adapt it over time, maybe focus the story on what they want it to be about. And I felt like there were maybe pieces missing for us to be really intrigued with Harold as an antagonist.
Yeah, because I do remember reading ahead of time that David Chase was pretty adamant he wanted it like under 2 hours, and it's basically like at 2 hours with credits. And I agree. That was one of the things I was going to bring up as well, is that like him as more of a side or new character. And maybe it's just because with these other characters, we already know them so well that I definitely wanted a little bit more of Harold. At least like you said, to like, I get his basic motivations and what he's about. But yeah, a little bit more of the a third dimension of him. I think Vera Farmiga is very good, but again, I mean, I feel like I don't know if we come out of this with more insight into Livia Soprano. I guess a little bit. She's not really doing an impression, but it's almost borderline that. And I don't know if she has like a prosthetic on her nose. It was a little distracting to me. But like, yeah, some of the characters, it's like we have shorthand because we know who they are, but we don't get a lot from them. I feel like John Bernthal as Johnny Soprano, there was a lot more potential there that we didn't get to see as well. But again, I guess it's just because it's a movie packed with so many characters. It's hard, maybe in a TV show we would be able to hang out with them more. But some of it left a little to be desired, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, and that might, as you said, be partially a result of trying to keep it under 2 hours. Like the same thing is true of the character of Polly Walnuts, who feels more like a reference than a character in this. He has like nail polish and a yellow suit, and that's kind of it. But like that's fine because it's Paulie, and maybe we needed a bit more of Livia and Johnny Soprano potentially.
Yeah.
But also I would probably have liked this film less if it was 3 hours long. So I get it as well.
Yeah, it's similar with like Pussy. Like he's just more of a reference. And another one, I mean, I don't want to harp too much on timeline, but like I've always thought like Silvio and Pussy were similar in age to Tony, but I guess that's not the case because it seems like they're a bit older here.
Yeah, and I know it's not the best indicator, but to kind of reconcile this, I went and looked at the ages of the original actors, and like James Gandolfini is younger by almost 10 years to the rest of the crew. And I know like in the canon, or again, this is on like Wikipedia or whatever, and when I looked it up, it's some fucking book that I have no idea whether David Chase or anyone important had anything to do with. but it's previously been stated the same thing that you've assumed, that they're like a couple of years older or whatever. And that's, I mean, I just felt better about it looking at the ages of the characters, and I'm like, all right, you know what? James Gandolfini is, 8 to 12 years younger than a lot of the rest of the crew, like Paulie and Silvio and so on. So I was like, all right, you know what? I am fine with this now.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Although I feel like Michael Gandolfini is good in it too, by the way, since we're talking about like the performances and stuff like that. Or are you gonna say otherwise? It sounded like maybe you're gonna say something.
No,
Right.
you're totally. I was just gonna say like, oh yeah, we didn't talk about Tony Soprano this whole time. We just went to
Yeah.
Paulie Walnuts and so on. Yeah, he's really good. I thought, as teenage Soprano, we have like a kid, William Ludwig, playing really young Tony Soprano. And
Yes.
he
He's good too.
does. He is pretty good, but he does mostly look at things. He's very similar to
Yes.
AJ in that respect.
Yes.
Like, there's a
Yep.
lot of him looking at shit, which is also, to be fair, young Tony in the show and all the flashbacks. He's always looking at stuff, and it's imprinted deep in his brain. So that all makes sense. But yeah, Michael Gandolfini, we talked about the trailer and like, I'm always being accused, and like his lines and everything. But actually, I'm so glad for his sake of what a good job he's done with this film, considering like the situation and everything. And yeah, no, I think he does a good job. And I think the only things that are lacking about his character is kind of what we talked about, where they could have gone a little bit further in sort of getting him to a point where he's significantly changed by the end of the film. Like, if Dickie's the protagonist, that's fine. If Tony's the protagonist, that's fine. But it didn't feel like they necessarily went all the way with what they could have done.
Yeah, the only, and again, it's more of a nitpick, is like, is he supposed to be playing like a 13-year-old Tony Soprano? Like, but that's the only thing where I'm like, all right. Because I can't tell like when we see like little Tony, because it's we do a time jump of like 4 years or what have you, and I'm like, what, this is like a 13-year-old kid? But hey, that's the magic of movies. I can't harp on it too much.
I guess that's kind of we need to rewatch it to dig into those details, because I don't remember it being 4 years, but like I can't, because they just said like the 70s came or whatever, so I don't know which part of the 70s we're in. I assumed he was getting like mid high school, whatever that is, sophomore or whatever. But yeah, hard to say. There's also a character called Giuseppina Moltisanti, who's quite central to the plot, and her portrayal is quite good. And even though as a character she's trotting kind of well walked ground, she's basically the immigrant coming to America looking for a better life and finding a lot of corruption. Again, very like literally straight off the boat, feels like a Godfather kind of vibe. But I think she does a good job of that character, which is an important one in the grand scheme of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. She kind of like doesn't have as much to do, but she, like, as far as like more depth to her character, I would say. But I think she, just a great performance still.
And so I guess last of the main-ish characters, what did you think of Corey Stoll as Junior?
Oh, he's great. I like Corey Stoll a lot as well. And I mean, another one I wish we got to see a little bit more of, but I don't think the movie does a disservice to how much we get of him. Like, I just wanted more of him, but it's not like some of the other characters where I'm like, oh, we needed a little bit more. I feel like we got the right amount of Junior, and I think it's great casting and great performance.
Yeah, I think it absolutely great casting. We've said it before in our trailer discussions, but you just look at him and you're like, yeah, I've seen him in other things, and I've seen Junior and stuff, so it should be like hard. But I look at him like, yeah, that's Junior. Your mother's cunt, indeed.
Yeah, he nailed those moments for sure.
So I guess we should give a spoiler warning and start getting into more details on this. So if you haven't yet, go and watch it and then come back. I think this is your spoiler warning.
Yeah, it's your spoiler warning. One of the things this is so minor, but again, this is what I hinted at before. It's like we see Silvio with his comb over. So we're okay, we get it. They're referencing that Silvio wears a wig. And then but then they also do a thing where his wig comes off later. It's like we already do one or the other. I feel just have him wear the wig the whole time, and then have the moment where his wig comes off. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Well, I think that's the major plot point we need to hit, since we don't have time to go into everything. Yeah, no, Silvio, honestly, was the voice for me, was the only, and I guess the kind of sideways face. And I was also like, Silvio's older than Tony, but I'm like, he's lost most of his hair when Tony's like 8 or whatever, like at the start of the film, or 10. So I was honestly like, it took me a little bit to, even though they do a fairly good job of saying like, what's your name? Pussy? Ha ha ha. Like they go through the different characters, they introduce you well enough, but they don't really, unfortunately, have time to go into all of them. And that's almost where I was like, yeah, maybe a TV show would have been cool, because they have all these actors. They've all had interviews in Rolling Stone. We've gotten to know them all, and then we don't really have time to explore the depths of what they're all about. For Silvio, that is good. As I said, with Paulie Walnuts, he feels more like a caricature, but not in a way that stands out. I honestly like a lot of the Silvio stuff where he's a bit cartoonish. You expect that more from Paulie. But yeah, anyway, these are not the major beats I was referring to.
It is. I mean, it is a nice Paulie moment where he's, concerned about his new jacket, and he gets blood all over it. Like, that's nice. Going back to Ray Liotta. So Ray Liotta plays Dickie's father, and then surprisingly, Dickie murders him. And I'm thinking, like, what the fuck? In the trailer, he's like talking to Dick. He's talking to his father. And it's an eye-rolly moment though, when Ray Liotta comes out and he's playing his uncle, and it's like, are they twins or whatever? Like, they in Sopranos already did this questionable move in the show with like Patsy and I forget his brother. But, so it's like it's so like sitcom-y, and I guess David Chase kind of has almost roots in like old TV, so it's like it's really tough to pull we have this actor because he's playing the twin brother, so he's back. But I think it does work here. And initially I was of the mindset of what I read on social media, where people were like, what is up with Ray Liotta's performance? But when I saw that he was playing Dickie's father, like, he's playing him a certain way, because then when we meet his uncle, I should know these goddamn character names, by the way. That's where I'm fucking up. We have Hollywood Dick Moltisanti is Dickie's father, and so he is playing him. Okay, yeah, so he is playing Hollywood Dickie, like a little bit over the top, grandiose, and like initially I was like, what is going on here? But then when that character dies and when he comes back more as the cold, murderous version of like his uncle, I was like, okay, this actually works, because I'm seeing different layers of his performance now, and now I get what he was doing earlier. At least that was my take when I watched it.
It should feel tacky. He had a twin brother all along, but in the context, the swerve got me so good. Like when he gets killed, it's such a good twist, and I thought for like probably a full 5 minutes that the prison clips from the trailer were filmed specifically to fuck with us. And I think that's an example of, I don't think it's bad what actually happened, but that's me expecting a more grand gesture in the storytelling than it actually was, or not in the storytelling necessarily, but and I don't think it was a bad thing, but I was kind of like, I was waiting for David Chase to pull the rug out from under me in an even greater way. This is kind of a large way, but I was genuinely like, those clips didn't even happen. They're just fucking with us. Like the ads for The Sopranos. It's finally there. I could experience it in real time. But it wasn't that. He had a twin brother all along. And honestly, I didn't find his performance at the start bad. I can see why someone would, or it's very like over the top, kind of cartoonish. It doesn't have a lot of depth to it, but I also feel like we're dealing with very standard tropes at the start. Like I said, besides immigrant coming to America, we have big family get-togethers and celebrations. It's essentially a lot of Godfather and other films in the genre type stuff, and his character is over the top in a way that I don't find unbelievable. I do find it believable, I should say. So yeah, I really like that. But then when he came back, he was in prison. I thought that was also a really nice part of having Dickie, give his own what's it called when you go to a priest? Confession. Like
Confession, yeah.
his confession / therapy throughout the latter parts of the film is talking to him, and it allows for some really good, insightful conversation. And the way he plays Sally is obviously very different. But yeah, they really are two sides of the same coin, and I think he does a stellar job of it.
Yeah, yeah. I almost, in the same vein how you were thinking it was just for the marketing, I'm thinking like, oh, here David Chase goes again. We're gonna have those jail scenes are like in a dream that Dickie's having, and he keeps seeing his
Yeah.
father and having these conversations. But no, it's just a little more simple than that. Just his twin. And yeah, you're right. They're great stand-ins for Tony and Melfi type scenes where we get to have Dickie. What's interesting is like, and I guess it's because we don't have episodes, because we see in these moments that Dickie wants to be a good person, but then I never got the sense that he actually wanted to be a good person. But I guess maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
Because in any other scene he doesn't want to be. And actually, now that we're kind of on the topic, is that blind baseball is a lie, right? Like he doesn't actually do that. That was a weird fantasy. He was just telling his uncle that he does, or what was your take on that?
That's interesting. I didn't read it that way, but I'd
Mm.
say that's possible because just as you said, it's not out of the blue exactly, but it's kind of the thing that Tony does as well, where he'll
Yeah.
go on these rants about how everyone's the worst and everyone's an idiot except him, and if people could just do this or people could just do that, it'd be a better world. But then he goes and does the most despicable thing imaginable and then just sits on it, and likes to pretend that he's always being accused.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be. I would have liked that to be a bit clearer if it was, but it also, maybe it's the way it's filmed is very like dream sequency, but I thought that was
That's
more
what
stylistic than it was, here's a dream.
that's what got me. Just the way it was filmed and the way everything was so like idealist and compounded with just the fact that almost everything else he was saying was a lie when he's talking about how people died and stuff like that.
True.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I even forgot about it till just now, and I was like, oh yeah. So I mean, those are going to be fun things to go back to when we watch this movie. I'll rewatch this movie, I should say. But yeah, like I think seeing the other side or the other character Leota gets to play does, even if you thought his performance initially was rough, I think it explains it more and puts it in a better spot. Um, but I don't know. Honestly, just talking about the movie now, I'm getting more excited about the movie for whatever reason. So
This happens to us sometimes, yeah.
yeah. And then going back to Leslie Odom Jr., Harold McBrayer, it's tough because I know we're gonna be jumping around a bit, but like we have this mid-credit scene almost, like not like barely mid-credits. It's like we get
Yeah.
a couple titles flash, then we see him again. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean like, because there's all this talk now of David Chase saying like, oh, maybe we'll do another movie, maybe we'll do something. I feel like if they do something, it's clearly going to be on this character. It's not going to be the young Tony Soprano show. Am I wrong for thinking this?
I was confused by that scene
Yeah.
in the theater because they end on a fairly strong shot that I'm sure we'll talk about for a bit.
Yeah.
And then it kind of has the first part of the credits and then it has this scene. And so I was watching it going like, what is even happening here? But on a rewatch, I think I understand it better because so what's happening there? Because I just, like in the theater, I was just like, what? Okay, he's giving money to someone, some guy's looking at him funny and he's like, hey, what's up? He's moving it on up is what's happening. They're just moving into this house that was sold. And so it's kind of reconnecting to Johnny Boy and his racism. And I think it's touching on this theme from basically mostly the first half of the film, but I mean it's throughout. It's all the race tensions and like the setting of it in the Newark riots between and the tension between the Italian American and African American communities. Like that's supposed to be a central thing, and I think that's what Harold's I mean, it's obvious that that's what Harold's character versus Dickie's character is supposed to express, but at times throughout, I don't really feel like it's touching that deeply on the theme. It's more like these guys have it out for each other. They're
Yep.
fucking the same girl. They want the same money, and that's all cool. But like, yeah, Dickie gives Junior a harder time than he does Harold, and so I think what this scene is supposed to be is him moving in on up. They've got this new house in a white neighborhood,
Yeah.
and that's why we're connecting back to it. Where because Dickie's out of the picture, he's fine at least for now, and he's doing that. But honestly, yeah, it's not. It doesn't hit as hard as it's presumably supposed to.
Well, because my problem with that, and again, this comes back to the trappings of a prequel, is that we've never heard of this guy again. And I get what you're saying, and you're probably right. That's all that means is he's moving on up. But then it feels like if he's moving up now, he should be like a major player. And again, I'm sure David Chase doesn't give a shit about stuff like this. He would just be like, yeah, no, he was out there doing stuff too. So
Well,
Tony
he could have been. Sorry, go on.
Well, it goes because yeah, the other side, depending on how you want to read it, is that like, you know, do we go for revenge for Dickie? Like, because it's assumed that you would think that he got shot because of this, war that's been building. So does that eventually happen where they go and take this guy out? Or I don't know. This is the tough stuff when you try to bring in a new character, and Star Wars does this all the fucking time. Where they're always doing prequels and they bring in this new character that's supposedly like Ahsoka or something for all my Star Wars heads out there. It's like, oh yeah, she's this great Jedi that just was out there while Star Wars was happening, but no one brought her up or anything. Now, again, I guess most people would say, who gives a shit? And you're probably right, but it's just tough to, try to work it out in my head when I get caught up in some of those timeline details. Of like, well, then, what was he doing when Tony was rising to power as we were watching The Sopranos? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's the 90s and this is the 70s. He definitely and he's involved in a lot of crime. He could have gotten killed. He could have retired.
Sure.
It could also be, you could also read the scene as the opposite of what I said, that, he got what he wanted in a sense. He did stack the paper and now he's moving on up, but everyone around him, all the white people are looking at him and still hating him. Like he could be just killed by his white neighbor or something, you know? That could be the point of it as well. But yeah, Harold is a bit not of a missed opportunity because, as you said, it's very clear. Like, it's not bad storytelling with him, but it's the fucking Sopranos, and when there's a main conflict between two characters, you expect maybe to see a bit more. And the scene, the big shootout scene where Harold kind of chases him into the club. He shoots through the door, and they look at each other through the door. I read it as Harold just leaves because he hears the sirens and knows it's time to go. My girlfriend read it as, why did we not find out why Harold chose not to kill Dickie? Because that is another potential reading of it. Like, yeah, there's sirens, but whatever. There's been 100 gunshots. Just pop him and run out. And I think the ambiguity of that is kind of the problem, in that we don't really know any more depths of the character, so we're kind of forced to assume, both with this and the ending scene.
Yeah, and it's always because it is The Sopranos, like you mentioned, and it's David Chase. I mean, I kind of knew going into this that even though we're seeing this rivalry build up, that clearly that's not going to be like, if you went into this and you thought that because of the setup of their rivalry between Dickie and Harold, that was going to be the cause of Dickie's death, you were not paying attention to The Sopranos. And it almost would have been a subversion by David Chase on himself to have Harold be the one that takes Dickie out. You know what I mean? So I guess I kind of knew that wasn't going to really go anywhere, but it's tough to, and they're like you'd mentioned, we're dealing with racial tensions and kind of big stuff. That's still things happening today. But does it earn that? Like, does it play out with those themes to, I'm not that they could solve race relations, but does it earn some of the weighty things they're going for? I'm not sure it does.
Yeah, and yeah, when we can get more into the ending and that, and when I was talking about like half measures, it's not that I necessarily was chomping at the bit to see Tony's first kill, but tell me that something like that would not have made the ending more satisfying, because he's being bounced around so much throughout the film of like, where will he end up, what will he become. And imagine you haven't seen The Sopranos and they just do like the pinky thing at the end, which is cool and symbolic, but also Dickie just got murdered, and I don't necessarily want Tony to go and kill the guy, but I also felt like that would have been a natural climax to him definitely choosing one of the paths in front of him, which is what he's sort of been going between, and getting to see that visually expressed and actually happen. It would have been just a lot. Well, yeah. Again, I don't think would have been a good ending. He wasn't looped into the gang warfare going on. But I feel like a frustrated kid running off and grabbing a gun and getting into a gunfight. That part of me is like, stop it, Jacob. You're asking for gratuitous cool shit to happen. You're the dumb viewer. But then I'm also like, yeah, but also it didn't. Like, there was so much time spent with Tony, and the conclusion of it was a pinky swear. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's tough because I know this isn't about Tony Soprano. I mean, it is a bit, but even like I don't feel like we got enough of teenage Dickie and Tony. I mean, we have him give him speakers or whatever, and then he decides like in classic I'm gonna die fashion, he decides like I'm gonna do good by this kid. You know what I mean? But by doing good by him, maybe this is the worst mistake I could make. So I wish there was more to that. I feel like they build it up pretty well with the younger Tony, and then when it's teenage Tony, there's not enough there. And again, maybe this is what we talked about before with things being edited to hit like a runtime or what have you. But I don't know. It's just the young Tony. I never got the impression that teenage Tony was never gonna not be a mobster. So I don't think it really hits that hard. That because Dickie dies, that it sets him on this path. I feel like he's already on that path, and maybe that's the point. And I also do agree with you. It would have been nice to see if there's some sort of, I mean, AJ-esque scenario where he goes to try to kill Junior and he drops the gun or whatever, like something like that. But
yeah.
Yeah, that also, us talking about that, David Chase would be like, yeah, of course. That's why I don't give you that. That's why you don't see me trying to go for revenge for Dickie Moltisanti, because I know that's what you want to see, and you're not getting it.
Yeah, I feel like Tony teenage Tony has a lot of interesting aspects, but he gets really into this idea of towards the end of getting his mother medicated, and it kind of takes over his arc a little bit. And it doesn't feel disingenuous, but it feels like they're quite busy setting up this, if Dickie hadn't died, Olivia would have been medicated, he would have shut Tony out of the mob thing, and he would have been a varsity athlete. And that does pretty much work, I think, of saying, like, because I really like Dickie's arc throughout the whole film. Like, I know I've talked about Harold a lot and how it might be lacking. I mean, yeah, Dickie killing his dad and getting together with his stepmom, it's like Pornhub level storylines. It's exploring the Oedipus complex on the level of complexity of a Pornhub video, but it's also like all of The Sopranos kind of does a lot of obvious shit like that, but gets deep into the psychology of it. And like the Oedipus complex is invented by Freud. They do psychoanalysis in this. I'm not complaining about it. In fact, the way it plays out is really good, I think, throughout. And when he kills his Guma, who is his stepmother, from finding out what's been going on, etc. I believe it, and it's a beautiful scene in the sea, by the way. But all of that sets, and we go from there, I think, to him talking in the prison, maybe imagining that he's doing the blind baseball thing, and he gets the input from Sally that he should stay out of Tony's life. That's the best thing he could do for him. And so I believe all of that setup. And the scene where Tony's outside keeps knocking on the door, and Dickie's like crying at it, like he's trying to shut him out, but he wants to let him in, but he won't let him shut him out. I thought that scene was beautiful, and I thought it was like a great emotional climax for pretty much the whole movie. So all of my other complaints around that, it has to be said that this film has some great moments. I think that's the first thing I said. There's a lot of stuff that's really great in it, and then it's just flagging a little bit in other bits. But I wanted to talk about that because Dickie's character, he is the main character, and that what I was talking about with the film trying to go have its cake and eat it too is that we do get into Tony. We get into, you know, his thing with the guidance counselor, which is an obvious parallel to the psychology he does or therapy he does later in life. It's like we don't lose sight of Dickie, but it makes us expect more from the Tony storyline.
Yeah, like I don't think and I mean, this was in the trailer. I think we mentioned it at the time. Like you don't like, it's fine to have that moment with the guidance counselor, and yes, it's like hinting at Melfi and stuff like that. But where you go too far is where he's a natural leader. Like I don't know. That's just too much. That's, you know, when you're just painting on a song, right? Because he's going to be Tony Soprano, and he's going to you know about Sun Tzu and the Art of War or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, because it's Dickie's story, I wish Tony was more intertwined with Dickie. But then again, you know, we have to know about, he always wants to take care of his mother. That's a big thing that still we'll see if you watch The Sopranos, and that's what kind of fucks him up. So, and again, this is like another person that kind of left him, he feels, and then like fully left him and set him on this path. So yeah, like you said, there's a lot of great stuff, but I guess, you know, we just want more. Give us more right now. Give me more. Give me a series. Give me 4 seasons.
I'd be concerned about a prequel show because I hesitate to say the words Better Call Saul, because last time we did that, we got slammed with a bad review, which is still our latest review, by the way. If anyone wants to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, it'd be much appreciated. But yeah, maybe David, as you said, David Chase has talked about how there might be another film that's probably going to be about Harold, but, you know, potentially about Tony Soprano's in his 20s or whatever. And in some ways that might hold the film back from just going all the way on these things. But yeah. Before we leave this point, showing him in Halston's, it first made me roll my eyes. But looking back, it seems like it's connected with Dickie and his decisions around what's happening, and Dickie passing away, etc. In that, and Halston is the place where Tony, spoiler alert, dies. So it just made it feel less like reference for reference sake. Go on.
But yeah, I feel like I get what you're saying, but I feel like it adds a lot of weight. Like it's different than, you know, seeing Polos Hermanos. I feel like it adds a lot of weight, and I feel like, because there's still so many people that are like, no, the audience got whacked. I actually got an argument with someone on Twitter about this. It's like, no, Tony's alive. It's we, the audience, that gets whacked. People love that theory, by the way, which, again, it's fine. The final episode of Sopranos is open enough where you can have your own thing. But I feel like this is David Chase being like, no, don't you see? I'm telling you again, because even like when young Tony's like, I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want someone just coming up behind me and shooting me. Like, that's telling you, hey, audience, because David Chase doesn't want to say it. But when little Tony is like, oh, I that's not what I want happening to me. And that's the same level of the guidance counselor saying, this guy's a great leader. I mean, he's going to lead the mob one day, clearly. He's going to manipulate his uncle, make his uncle thinks he's the boss. But, you know, young Tony's saying that. And then, yeah, like it's borderline just a reference for reference. But it made me feel better about using that opening clip of young Tony and Artie swearing, because then when it cuts like to the wide and you have Holston's, and it really is like towering over, like your inevitable fate is towering over you. And then the fact that he then goes back there and it's tied in with the death of Dickie, and just like it's just like death, 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 Holston's and ice cream and onion rings, like they're all there. And I mean,
Where's
that
the
reminds me,
eggs? Where's the fucking eggs, though?
yeah. And that reminds me, we haven't even mentioned the decision to bring back Michael Imperioli to narrate as Christopher Moltisanti.
Dude, I was gonna say, when you were going through this, maybe I texted you about this, but I thought the start of the film, we were gonna pan right over to Tony Soprano's grave. That would have been a baller fucking move. Like, again, not saying it would have been better necessarily, but that's the kind of grand fuck you shit I would expect. Like, the very first shot is like, oh, you've been asking me for years and years and years. Well, fuck you. Here's your answer. Tony Soprano's dead. There's his gravestone. Go fuck yourself. We're going back in time now to learn about this dead fuck. And I think that would have been it would have taken it up a notch, you know? But instead we go to Christopher's grave, and in a sense there's it's still like basically confirming that there's an afterlife, because he's saying like in this universe, because it's him talking about being dead. He's after being dead, just after dying, as they'd say in Ireland. So yeah,
I would think at the very least it kind of confirms the people go back and forth on the dream episodes where Tony's Kevin Finnerty. I feel like in a weird way, it kind of confirms that is like he was in like a weird limbo potentially. I do love, I mean, I don't know if I'm in love with the choice of having him narrate it. I mean, if you did go into this and not watch The Sopranos, they kind of are like, hey, fuck you. We're going to tell you plot points, because, he does say that's my Uncle Tony. He strangles me, but that's much later. I really love the idea of at the beginning, as we're panning by other people's graves, that you hear they're talking as well, because it's like it's kind of like scary and depressing that all these dead people are just like yearning to tell their stories and no one around them. But we happen to be checking in with Christopher Moltisanti to get to hear his story. But there's something like really scary to me about that, and it kind of was like a nice haunting beginning. Because I obviously don't know what's going on at first. I'm hearing these voices, like is it just a crowd around? Where are we going? And then it all clicks in once we hear Christopher narrating.
Yeah. I felt like Christopher's voiceover was a bit like a half measure. It's starting with like, there's my uncle, he choked me to death. In a way, it's a fuck you to people like my girlfriend who haven't watched The Sopranos and now wants to watch The Sopranos, because I had to be like, yeah, that's not like season 1 shit. That's like
there's only 3 episodes left shit.
Yeah, I'm a little annoyed that they did that to you. I'm not gonna lie, because their relationship is so important in The Sopranos. I guess it does make sense. It does have a purpose in that the film, for what it is, it needs to build the ominous nature of what Tony will become. Because if you don't have that, it's going to be like if you watched fucking Star Wars Episode 1 and you're like, who gives a shit about this Anakin kid? Like, what is going on? Like, why are we focusing on him? But I feel like at the same time, leaving that out and just telling us a story, and that's like it might have made for a better story if you didn't have to rely on it. At the same time, it's fucking Sopranos film, and if they had none of that, like none of those types of references, I feel like it wouldn't work out either. So it's kind of and it also doesn't appear much in the film at all. Like, honestly, it's here and there sprinkled in, and it makes me wonder about if that was always the plan or not. And I'm sure we'll never know because of David Chase and how he is. But as we said, like it seemed like I found the quote of there's some aspects of the storylines were dropped during editing to let the storylines take shape with the film's overall narrative. I wonder, I think it would have been there from the start. It makes sense. It's a very David Chase kind of idea to do it, but it also is not super central. The main thing it does is go, hey, this guy Tony, in case you didn't know, he's going to be real bad later.
And actually, we'll check in here. We got an email from a listener that had watched the film, Mark. Hi, Jim and Jacob. I've really enjoyed listening to your Sopranos talk again around the trailers for Many Saints of Newark. And having just seen the film, I'm looking forward to your analysis. My first impression was that it's pretty good, not quite what I expected, but good nonetheless. But having had a bit more time to reflect, I'm actually thinking it's much better than that. Obviously, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but there are certain aspects that didn't work for me, like the narration, say no more, and certain casting choices. But overall, I really enjoyed the film and would definitely see it again. Incidentally, the Guardian newspaper in the UK recently ran a list of the top 30 mobster movies. This predated the release of Many Saints, but I think it could find a place on that list. Whereabouts, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that they've got their number one wrong. They placed Godfather Part 2 in the top spot with Part 1 third and Goodfellas in between. No problem with Goodfellas at number 2. It could even take first, and those films would always make my top 3 mob movies. But I'm with you, Jim. That's me. The Godfather 1 beats 2 every time. Absolutely. I know that doesn't have anything to do with Many Saints of Newark, but I wanted to read it anyways. But
I actually read, I saw that article because we were basically like, what are we gonna do with the cut to black feed? Should we do more mob films? And I was looking at it and I was like, number 2 at the top spot. Come on. I had the exact same thought. And if I can reconnect it for a second, the genius of The Godfather 1 is the simplicity of the story, or perhaps like focus is a better word for it, because it's got like levels to it, but it's an incredibly focused story in what it tries to tell. And that's kind of where Many Saints is really different at least it feels different to me in that it's kind of trying to do a few different things. It's got a lot of balls in the air and some of them are fucking whacked out of the park. But then other bits, maybe not as much.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I could but back to the narration, it's weird because I don't love it, but then I'm also kind of glad they have it in a weird way. But I also, I was also even a little annoyed with the spoilers, even though it's been 14 years. You should watch Sopranos by now. So it's an interesting choice, and I mean, Sopranos always loves to play around with death in the afterlife, so it does fit right in there. And I guess just for the fact that they were able to then bring back, I think when we talked about the episode where the line is in it, I mentioned how it is like it's an iconic, almost a single line that kind of could just like completely describe the Sopranos. Is when
Sacre bleu, where is me mama?
Yeah, that's the guy, Adriana, my Uncle Tony, the guy I'm going to hell for. But of course, now it's the guy I went to hell for. And then when it's again, there are these things that should not work, but with the Sopranos theme kicks in, you can't help but be like, "Fuck yeah, fuck yeah, let's fire up the pilot right now. Let's watch the whole series."
It had me a bit conflicted, to be honest, the ending theme, because that felt like a movie exec kind of decision rather than like an artistic one of like, no, you gotta put the theme there at the end. I loved it, and while the credits were playing, but yeah, the guy I went to hell for, I forgot about that line. I'm so sorry. I am going to rewatch The Sopranos after this for sure, but I've only watched it once in full, really diving into obviously all the episodes in detail. That's a line that almost distracts from the pinky swear in that at the end. And yeah, with the pinky swear, I feel like I grasped the symbolism of it, but it still left me wanting a little bit more. But then we get another scene. We already talked about the scene with Harold at the credits. So it was just kind of, at the end, as I said, I was just clutching my face. I got a picture of it. I'll put it in the description.
And I mean, yeah, we need to mention the reveal that Uncle Jr. is the one behind Dickie's death, which I did message you before. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a genius, but when Jr. falls and Dickie's laughing at him, I'm like, oh my fucking God, Jr. kills Dickie. Obviously, there's more to it than just him falling and being laughed at. Like he's, Johnny Boy Sopranos telling Junior how Dickie is stepping up and doing great, and he's younger than you. Dickie's this guy that everyone thinks is cooler than him. And if you know anything about Junior Soprano, he's not going to let that slide. I've seen some people say that this confirms that cop that Christopher kills did not kill his father. I would say not necessarily, because we still don't see the gunman. Someone else does the shooting. So very easily could still be that cop that Christopher kills, which would be really interesting if that is the case, because then it would come out that everyone does kind of know that maybe not necessarily Junior was the one behind it, but it wasn't due to their race war that was building between like the black community and the Italian community.
So yeah, remind me what the situation is in The Sopranos there. People know that it was this cop, or is it just Tony that knows this?
No, well, there's just that episode is it the beginning of season 4?
Yeah.
It's beginning of season 4, because that's when Tony's looking to groom Christopher to be like his main guy and insulate him from everyone else. And he takes Chris out, and he's like, the cops celebrating his retirement. He was like an inside guy for them, like someone on their payroll, but now he's retiring, so he has no use. And that's when he tells Christopher about how, or Christopher brings up like he was carrying TV trays for him or something like that. I mean, they do mention the TV trays, so that is confirmed from the film. And he came and shot him, and then he gives that information to Christopher, who takes this cop kind of hostage in his house, and the cop's pleading with him, saying it wasn't me, they're setting you up. And that's when he basically says, like, it doesn't matter, like whether you're the guy or not, he wants you dead, so might as well. And there's always been the question, like, was Tony just fucking with Christopher? Like, is it a lie? But I would almost guess it would be more interesting if it is still true, and it just became known later on that maybe not that they knew that Uncle Junior specifically is the one that did it, but they knew that one of their associates hired someone to kill Dickie, and it was just kind of like, well, business goes on. These relationships really don't mean that much in the end when it comes down to business and money.
Yeah, I don't know. I could go either way, because I feel like if Tony knew who killed Dickie at any point, he would have just gone and killed them or had them killed, right? Because in this film, Dickie's his fucking dad. He's more of a father figure than his dad. And on that episode of The Sopranos made me think that, and I think it makes Christopher kind of question as well, did Tony actually kill my dad or whatever? Because he's a fucking manipulator, and like he could just, everything he says is a fucking lie. But given what we see in the film, it's like he could have. Yeah, I feel like he would have, even if he doesn't do it at the end of the film, like I was, begging for the simp that I am. I wanted to see Tony rush off and try to kill this guy, whoever it may be that's behind it. Even if we don't see that, I feel like Tony knowing who it is and then not doing shit about it doesn't quite sound right, unless it's just decades of becoming calloused and detached from everything.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. And when I'm also, this is somewhat off topic, but I just reminded myself I didn't pull the fucking. Actually, is this it here? Let me see if I can pull it real quick now. Try to do it on the fly. It's not going to be exact.
How am I supposed to enjoy a Broadway show with my children and their pets?
Ma, I don't smoke pot.
Well, your sister comes in here smelling like a gypsy.
Well, I'm not my sister. I'm always being accused.
Oh, poor you.
I need to add the new "poor you" to the soundboard.
Yes, that was. Can we play back the other ones? But yeah, that was one of those moments where it was like the varsity athlete line, which I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but that line I was like, yeah, that was like a prequel line that got me though. I was like, yes, poor you, ha ha ha.
But yeah, I mean, it's like you have to have it, you need it. Do I have the other ones? I think I might.
Thank God.
Well, let me see.
You better have them.
I better have these goddamn. What folder did I have them in? All right, hold on.
Oh, poor you.
Yeah, we have that, of course.
Oh, poor you.
Then we have his mistress.
Oh, poor you.
Then of course we have Tony.
Tony himself.
Poor you.
Then we have AJ.
Generations.
That's another Tony.
Oh, poor you.
Yeah, and of course another. I think Tony has like the most.
Yeah. You know what we didn't do though? I mean, we could have brought back the death counter for this, like officially.
Yeah, we'll do that on the
Didn't think it through.
rewatch.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that on the rewatch for sure.
So yeah, we've talked about it for about an hour. We could talk about it, I'm sure, for another hour, but we need to watch it again first. And I also think, like, for more of the historical context of the riots and what was going on with the mob, the real mob at the time, do subscribe to Real History, which you can find at showswhatyouknow.com. We're planning to put out an episode on the Many Saints of Newark in season 3. We're on hiatus right now between seasons, but I think it would be of interest. And I mean, yeah, I guess we're wrapping up. I was going to say showswhatyouknow.com for all of our other shows, but are there more things you want to discuss, Jim?
I'm just trying to. I'm taking one more peek here at the funeral scene, and then of course, Olivia is like, "Oh, I used to think Dickie was strong. He's taking those crazy pills."
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess like we have that moment where Junior like pauses there. I mean, I guess it kind of is that regret. Is that just kind of what have I done? Do you have like a read on that? When he pauses at his grave, like he's like staring at him, or is that just another like when Junior?
Sorry, we're on a slight delay, but the twist of him having done it, I thought was really well presented and surprising, and it kind of like, I don't know, it brought new dimension to the character of Junior in The Sopranos, though I suppose given what goes down in the first season, we shouldn't be surprised that he's at this kind of shit, even in his younger days, because, he tries to take out Tony and take over the whole thing and that. But it was still like, the pettiness of it. It was like, it's so Junior, it makes so much sense, but it was still surprising. And Junior's just a fucking, like, he's such an interesting character, I think, when he's staring at him. Yeah, it's really hard to say what's going through his mind, but I think he's just kind of zoned out with what he's done, and not necessarily that he's regretting it, but just kind of like, oh, I did that, the reality of it versus the annoyance that he dealt with, and now there's a corpse.
And I guess just similar shades of like of Dickie himself, and just the fact that these are, like sociopathic murderers, but they're still humans, because I mean, honestly, Dickie just deserved it still. Because Dickie did we've seen 2 of his major petty murders he did in this film. He kills his father, and then he kills his Guma, who was his stepmother, over basically nothing. So in a way, it's almost like Junior's just as justified as Dickie was, but he's got those same, feelings of like, oh, geez, like, is it this? Is this what I'm supposed to do? And then I almost was wondering, because Tony wears like a pinky ring like that too. So I was like, he's gonna pick it off, but no, he just does the old pinky swear, which is nice.
Yeah, and I
It would've
guess
been too far if he took it and put it on, and they're like, haha.
Now I am the master. I feel like from the pinky swear, we're like the pinky swear promise is supposed to have shifted its meaning, I guess, because when they first do it, it's like, do better, be a good kid, don't fuck up so much. Your mom's going through a lot of shit. And that's the purpose of the pinky swear. But then by the end, it seems to have shifted its meaning to, yeah, we're connected, I'm going to follow in your footsteps, which isn't what Dickie wanted. But I also feel like Dickie kind of wanted that at the same time, because he wants to shut Tony out, and he wants to be close to him. He's like, Christopher is just a baby. He's possibly the closest thing he has to a son. And it's kind of the same with Tony, where he hates people but loves them, and wants to push them away but wants to corrupt them and make them as bad as he is at the same time to prove that he's not a bad person, like what he does with Bobby, making him go and kill someone just for the sake of tarnishing his soul so that he feels better about who he is. In some ways, maybe Dickie did want that, but at the same time, I'm like, well, the pinky swear meant be good, but now it means be bad, I guess. And it is all grand and symbolic, but as I've said like 10 times, you could have had Tony do something more as that, because as I said, he spends the first half of the film just looking at stuff. He does a little bit of stuff for sure, but like as a kid, he's just looking at stuff. He's AJ, taking shit in, and then at the end, he also just looks at his father figure dead. He doesn't do a thing about it. So just would have liked a bit more there.
Well, and also that reminds me, that was one thing I wanted to bring up, is that we have that scene where Dickie's saying how he wants a son so bad. But I like that then when he has a son, like there's no scenes of him being like a father or anything like that. Like he doesn't change or do anything different. It's just like, oh, I have a kid now. I did think it was weird that he brings up like, my wife can't have a kid. I thought they were setting up some sort of weird twist where like his Guma, like Christopher's mother wasn't his mother or some bullshit like that. I mean, I'm glad they didn't. It's just all of a sudden like, he just has a son. But he doesn't care. He didn't really want a son. He just wanted to say he wanted a son. He just wants to pretend he's a good person when he's a piece of shit. That's the Sopranos for you.
Yeah, exactly. He wants the legacy of him. He wants immortality through making a copy of himself, and he ended up doing that with Tony instead. Whoops. There you go. But yeah, there's probably loads more to say. And if you've had a chance to watch it and you've listened this far through, I know we beg for reviews all the time, but you can send us your thoughts on the Many Saints of Newark, either in a review or email us. And if we get enough emails, that'll definitely be a reason enough to do another episode, dig into different people's opinions, because I think I'm really interested in hearing other people's analysis and reading of the film, whether they loved it or hated it or in between, because I'm not fully settled on what my opinion is, and we're giving it that chance. We're going to rewatch it. We're going to keep discussing it, because it's part of The Sopranos and it's what we do. But if you have any thoughts that we haven't touched on, or if you want to comment on what we have said, you can email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Twitter, if you have a short thought, at showswhatyouKnow. That's the letter U. Beyond that, is there anything else to say, Jim?
Well, one thing I wanted to call before the last thing is Alessandro Nivola, who plays Dickie Moltisanti. He's also great in this film called The Art of Self-Defense, where he plays the sensei. And it's a movie I've been wanting for us to discuss on our Cobra Kai podcast, but maybe we'll have to discuss it on both, because I think it's worth checking out, because he's great in that as well. And also I'm seeing that he's a Boston native. Good for him. So yes, outside of that, there's only one thing left to say.
What's that?
Cut to black.